You ever hear something so disturbing you laugh at first, because your brain refuses to believe it's real? That's exactly what happened to me, 1 month after we booked our wedding venue. When my fiancé's dad looked her dead in the eye and said, "I'll just stay in your room on the wedding night." Yeah, you heard that right. On our wedding night. By the way, this is a brand new channel, and your support truly means the world to me. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button, give the video a like, and help me reach my first 1,000 subscribers. And when you subscribe, drop a comment below telling me what number subscriber you are. I'd love to see how this community is growing, one person at a time. My name's Maya. I'm 27 years old, and I'm marrying the love of my life, Sophie, next spring. We rented a cozy 3-bedroom house for a small backyard wedding. Just friends, laughter, good vibes. Nothing extravagant, just us and the people who actually matter. At least that was the plan. See, Sophie recently started mending things with her dad, Richard. They'd been estranged for years. His fault, not hers. But she wanted to give him another chance. So without really discussing it with me first, she invited him to the wedding. And that's where everything started to shift. Because when Richard heard that the nearby resort was nearly booked out, and that our friends already had the extra rooms in the house reserved, he just shrugged. "Oh, that's fine," he said. "I'll just stay with you two then." Sophie laughed. How could she not? It sounded like a joke. Who says that? Who invites themselves into their daughter's wedding night bedroom? She laughed, until she realized he wasn't joking. He kept repeating it, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "I'll just sleep in your room." And every time, my skin crawled. I tried to play it off at first, tried to trust Sophie to shut it down. But the more he brought it up, the more I realized something chilling. He actually thought this was an option. And here's the worst part. It wasn't even the first time. Last year, Richard suggested Sophie and I tag along on his trip to Bali. Said we could all share one resort room to save money. That time, Sophie just rolled her eyes. But now it wasn't some hypothetical vacation. This was our wedding, our space, our first night as a married couple. And he was trying to wedge himself right into the middle of it. I'll be honest, I don't have a dad, never did, so maybe I don't understand what's normal here. But to me, this wasn't just awkward, it was disturbing, creepy, wrong. Sophie kept saying he didn't mean it like that he was just clueless, that pushing him out might ruin the fragile truce she'd built. And I tried, I really did, to see it her way, but my gut wouldn't let it go, because this wasn't about logistics. This was about boundaries, or rather his complete refusal to recognize them. Every time she told him no, he circled back, like a salesman who doesn't understand the word. "No rooms left in the house. I'll share with you. The resort's full. I'll just stay with you." And every time I felt more invisible. Like my comfort didn't matter. Like the word no was negotiable if he pushed hard enough. I didn't want to fight with Sophie. This was supposed to be our happiest year. But how do you explain to the woman you love that her father's behavior isn't just inconvenient? It feels unsafe. It wasn't just about a bed. It was about respect. About whether he saw us as a couple with our own life, or just two girls he could bulldoze because he didn't understand what marriage actually means. The night he said it for the 3rd time, Sophie and I were sitting in our kitchen, planning out the seating chart. She looked so tired, her pen hovering over a blank square where his name was supposed to go. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. And that was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just about the wedding. It was about her entire relationship with him. Years of guilt, of second chances, of swallowing her discomfort so he wouldn't explode or vanish again. I reached across the table, took her hand, and said quietly, "Then we draw the line, together. Because if he could bulldoze her on this, what would stop him next time?" That night I opened my laptop, started typing out an email I wasn't sure I'd ever send. Not to Richard, but to the resort, to the house manager, to anyone who could help me put actual walls between us and him. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something dangerous, something unfamiliar, control. When I hit send on those emails to the resort, the property manager, I expected maybe a wait list, maybe a polite rejection. What I didn't expect was an immediate response. The resort had a single room open, not one of the nice suites, not even in the main building, just a leftover corner room above the maintenance shed. But it was a bed, a door, a place where Richard could sleep that wasn't inside our walls, I told Sophie. Her shoulders sagged in relief, like someone had just cut a chain from her neck. Good, she said softly. That solves it. But deep down, I knew it didn't. Because Richard wasn't just a man without a bed. He was a man who didn't understand now. The very next night, Sophie's phone buzzed. It was him. She let it go to voicemail. Then another buzz. Then another. By the time she caved and answered, his voice was already sharp. I don't understand why you're shutting me out, he snapped. Dad, we got you a room, she explained, gentle as ever. That's not the point. I want to be close to you, to share the moment. It's tradition. I could hear him through the receiver, even from across the room, and I swear my blood turned cold. Tradition? Since when does tradition mean crashing your daughter's wedding night? But Sophie, God, Sophie, just kept trying to pacify him. Dad, you'll be close. The resort is a 5-minute walk. That's not the same. His voice dropped lower, like it carried weight. You're supposed to include family. I saw the way she flinched. The way old guilt washed over her face like a tide. And that's when I realized this wasn't new. This was muscle memory. Years of it. After she hung up, she sat in silence, just staring at her hands. I wanted to shout, to shake her, to tell her he was manipulating her. But I didn't, because I knew she already knew. So instead I asked carefully, is this how it always was with him? Her eyes flicked up, hesitant. And then the story started to slip out. How when she was a teenager, he'd guilt her for not calling enough. How he'd sulk when she wanted to spend Christmas with friends instead of him. How he made her feel like love was something you paid for in obedience, not something freely given. And suddenly, it all clicked. The wedding room wasn't about convenience. It was about control, about reminding her that even on the most important night of her life, she was still his to intrude on. I reached for her hand again. Sophie, I whispered, he doesn't get to do this anymore. She nodded. But her eyes were wet. Then what do we do? The next weekend, Richard showed up at the house. No warning, no invitation. Just his truck pulling into the gravel drive while Sophie and I were stringing up fairy lights in the backyard. I'll never forget the way he leaned against the hood, arms folded like he owned the place. So, he said, without so much as a hello, where's my room? Sophie froze. I stepped forward. You have a room? I said evenly. At the resort. His eyes snapped to me hard and sharp. I wasn't asking you. The air between us turned thick, heavy. Sophie's fingers brushed mine, like she needed the anchor. Dad, she said finally, voice trembling. You're staying at the resort. That's final. His face darkened. He opened his mouth, closed it, then gave this little laugh, the kind of laugh that isn't laughter at all, just a threat dressed in humor. You girls are making a mistake, he muttered, and then he drove away. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the old rental house sounded like his boots on the stairs. Every flicker of headlights through the blinds made my stomach knot. Because it wasn't just about a room anymore. Richard wanted in. And if we didn't hold the line, I had the sickening feeling he'd find a way to take more than just space in our house. I used to think persistence was a virtue, that if someone fought hard enough for what they wanted, it meant they cared. But Richard taught me something different. Persistence without boundaries isn't love. It's pressure. It's control, and he wasn't letting go. 3 days after that standoff in the driveway, Sophie's phone lit up again. Over and over. 10 calls in a row, then silence. An hour later, another round. By morning, her voicemail was full. At first, it was the usual guilt. You're hurting your mother. You're embarrassing me. Then it turned darker. If you're shutting me out, maybe I won't bother showing up at all. Maybe I'll tell the whole family what you're really like. And then came the one that made my stomach flip. If you think you can keep me away, you've got another thing coming. I'll sleep wherever I damn well please. That night, Sophie sat on the edge of the bed, phone clutched in her hand like it was made of glass. Maybe we should just give him the resort room, she whispered. Let him think he won. No, I said immediately. Too fast, too sharp. She flinched. I softened my tone. Babe, if we cave now, he won't stop. Not at the wedding. Not after. He'll keep pushing until he's standing in our kitchen with a key that doesn't belong to him. She nodded, but I could see the war inside her. The child who wanted to keep the peace, fighting the woman who wanted to be free. The next morning, Richard proved me right. We drove out to the house early to check on the tent rental for the reception. And when we pulled into the driveway, his truck was already there, parked crooked, engine still warm. He was inside. We found him in the living room, feet up on the coffee table, flipping through the rental agreement we'd left on the counter. "What are you doing here?" Sophie's voice cracked. He didn't answer her. Just looked at me, long, unblinking. "I told you," he said finally. "I'll sleep where I want." Something in me snapped. "This isn't your house," I said. My voice was steady, but my hands shook. "It's ours. You're a guest, and guests don't get to break in." He smirked. "Break in?" The door wasn't locked. That was true. But that didn't make it better. That made it worse. Because it meant he'd checked. He'd tried the handle. And when it opened, he walked right in like he belonged. Sophie stepped between us then, her hands out like she was keeping wild dogs apart. "Dad, please, stop!" But he didn't. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You think you're grown. You think you can cut me out. But you wouldn't have a wedding if it wasn't for me. Who do you think taught you responsibility? Who do you think raised you? You don't just erase that." And there it was again, the twisting of love into a leash. I wanted to scream, to throw him out physically if I had to. But I saw Sophie's face. Pale. Trembling. Fighting not to fold under the weight of his words. So instead, I did the one thing he didn't expect. I pulled out my phone and hit record. "Keep talking," I said quietly. His eyes flicked to the red light on the screen. For the first time, his confidence wavered. "You don't get to do that," he snapped. "Neither do you," I shot back. For a long moment, no one moved. Then he stood, muttering under his breath. He shoved past Sophie on his way to the door. "This isn't over," he said, and slammed it behind him. That night, Sophie cried herself to sleep, not just from fear, from grief, because deep down, she knew something final had broken between them. And me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words in my head. This isn't over. He meant it. Weddings are supposed to be about joy, about family coming together. But as I stood at the altar, waiting for Sophie to walk down the aisle, I wasn't thinking about vows or rings. I was thinking about Richard, because when a man like him says, "This isn't over," he doesn't mean someday. He means today. The ceremony started beautifully. Sophie appeared at the end of the aisle, veil glowing in the late afternoon light. And for a moment, everything else faded. Her trembling hands slipped into mine. The music hushed. The pastor began to speak, and then, the sound of heavy boots on gravel, every head turned. Richard, marching toward us, jaw tight, face red, like a storm that refused to break, stopped the wedding. His voice ripped through the air. Gasps echoed. Someone dropped a glass. He pointed at me. "This man is manipulating my daughter." He turned her against me. Against her own blood. Sophie's grip on my hand tightened. I could feel her shaking. The pastor stuttered, lost for words. Guess whispered. Phone started recording, and me, I stepped forward. "Richard, enough." My voice carried more than I expected. Years of swallowed anger sharpened into steel. "You don't get to hijack this day." "Not anymore." He laughed, bitter and wild. "You think you can cut me out? I built this family. I raised her. Without me, you'd have nothing." Sophie's voice cut through then. Clear, strong, trembling but unbroken. "No, Dad. Without you, I'd finally have peace." The silence after that was deafening. Richard froze. His mouth opened, then closed again. For once, he had no script, no weapon. The weight of her words landed harder than anything I could have said. Gasps. Whispers. And then, applause. It started with Sophie's maid of honor, then rippled through the crowd until the entire room was clapping, standing between us and the man who thought he still had power. Richard's face went pale. He turned, muttered something I couldn't hear, and stormed out. The doors slammed behind him, and just like that, the air changed, lighter, freer. The pastor cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and said quietly, almost to himself, "Shall we continue?" We did. We exchanged vows, placed rings, and when Sophie whispered, "I do," her voice no longer trembled, because she wasn't just marrying me. She was choosing herself. Later, under the string lights of the reception, Sophie leaned against me, her eyes tired but shining. "Do you think he'll come back?" she asked. I kissed her forehead. "Maybe, but if he does, he'll find we're not afraid anymore." She nodded, and for the first time in years, I saw relief on her face, not because the fight was over, but because she'd finally stopped fighting alone. I thought the wedding was the end. The slam of those church doors felt final, like Richard had finally lost. But people like him, they don't just vanish, they regroup, they reload, and they come back swinging. 2 weeks after the wedding, an envelope showed up at our door. No return address. Inside, a letter from Richard's lawyer. Cease all defamatory speech. Retract your social media posts. Apologize publicly. Or face legal action. I laughed when I read it. Sophie didn't. She sat at the table, hands shaking, lips pressed white. "This will never end," she whispered. "He'll never let me go." That night, I made a choice. I wasn't going to let him drag her back into fear. We went to see our own lawyer. She flipped through the papers, then looked up at us with a smirk. "This is nothing. Empty threats. If he pushes, we push back harder. You have proof. You have witnesses. He has nothing." For the first time, I saw Sophie breathe again. Really breathe. Weeks passed. No lawsuit. No apology demanded. Just silence. And in that silence, something grew. Sophie started smiling more. She signed up for classes she'd always wanted to take. She called her mom, not to ask permission, but to set boundaries. And me? I finally stopped feeling like a soldier in someone else's war. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip low, Sophie said something I'll never forget. "Do you think I was wrong? Cutting him out?" I looked at her, at the woman who had carried decades of weight that was never hers to carry. "No," I said. "You didn't cut him out. You set yourself free. There's a difference." Her eyes filled, but this time, not with fear, with something softer, lighter, peace. And that's the truth I want you to take with you. Sometimes family isn't love. Sometimes family is control, manipulation, a prison built out of guilt. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting to stay, but finding the strength to walk away